Hello and welcome to Season 2 of the Holistic Feline and Friends podcast, home for all things holistic and healthful for our pets. I'm your host, Angela, also known as the Holistic Feline on Instagram. We are so excited to be back with you in Season 2, bringing even more education to the forefront of pet parents' minds and hearts, empowering you for a healthier you and pet tomorrow. This season is a big one, with the majority of the episodes exposing some sort of huge crack in the pet industry that has misled pet guardians for decades, exposing the truth in a broken system. The intention is to educate and empower pet parents about some of the most dangerous, normalized aspects in pet health by bringing truth to light and providing healthy, natural, and holistic alternatives, so that our furry loves can live well into their 20s and 30s. I invite you to listen to this season with an open mind, eyes, ears, and hearts. The truth can be hard to hear at times or harsh to some, but it remains the truth. In this powerful opening episode, we welcome Dr. Tom Lonsdale, known as the Whistleblower Vet, to pull back the curtain and explain the inner workings and the behind-the-scenes operations of the pet food industry. An industry he calls a multi-billion-dollar pet food fraud hiding in plain sight. He blows the whistle on how manufacturers and vets selectively disregard scientific facts, pushing money-making products and services that cost us billions and ultimately our pets their lives. Dr. Tom talks how manufacturers and their pursuit of profit are putting revenue before animal welfare in an industry valued globally at $147.3 billion in 2023. He has called this a global epidemic for decades now, and it has only grown in velocity and magnitude, affecting everyone in its path, from pets to pet parents to aspiring and established vets. This pet food fraud affects us all. Dr. Tom explains the shameful failings of pet food manufacturers, veterinary practices, and veterinary schools and their intent on keeping us in the dark. He details the lengths that pet food manufacturers and the vets they partner with will go to perpetuate the myth that canned and kibbled food isn't detrimental to pets' health. Since the early 1990s, he has been exposing the inconvenient, unpalatable truth that these commercial, highly processed diets we feed our pets are responsible for causing a global epidemic of sickness and suffering. Toward the end of the episode, we share a story about one of his furry clients, Duchess, who changed his life, perspective, and his practice. The story is powerful, and my hope is that it brings solace to fellow veterinarians who may walk Dr. Tom's familiar path. May it inspire introspection, clear a troubled conscience, and fuel a new start within souls and veterinary practice. And so to kick off this episode and this whole season, a quote from Dr. Tom Lonsdale, as he says it best: "It's time to blow away the smokescreen for your pets and wallet's sake. Are you ready?" So without further ado, here is Dr. Tom Lonsdale. Hello, Dr. Tom. Welcome to our part of the world. You are joining us all the way from Australia today. Thank you so much for being here. It's such an honor to have you.
I'm the lucky one. Amazing that we can be talking across half the globe. You there in your evening of yesterday. We're in mid-afternoon of today.
So weird, huh?
Yeah.
It's like we're going back in time and then going into the future all at the same time.
Yes, that's right.
So you are known as the Whistleblower Vet. So let's begin with a self-introduction. Can you please introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and how you got that title?
Thank you. Yes. Well, my name is Tom Lonsdale, and I was born way back in the first half of the last century in 1949. And I lived a conventional life in the countryside of the UK until I went to the London Vet School in 1967. And then almost 5 years were spent learning the art and craft of being a vet. During the holidays, I traveled as extensively as I could by hitchhike. I had no money, but in those days, we hitchhiked everywhere. So that was fantastic. 2 years I spent in San Jose working in the pickle works in sunny California there, and that was fantastic. So, I got very happy memories of being there. Eventually, I graduated in 1972 and did a whole variety of different jobs, small animals, large animals, horses, cattle, sheep, pigs, and zoo animals. I worked in one safari park and another quarantine station, so I had exposure to those things. Eventually, I emigrated to Australia and set up my own practice. I thought I knew what I was doing. I thought I got the theory and the practical experience sufficient to start my own practice. And that occurred in 1981. But it was really almost another 10 years before I started to wake up to the reality of why all the animals were sick. And it didn't come instantly. It came about as a result of talking with other vets, considering that the caseload of animals that we were seeing, predominantly cats and dogs at that time. And of course, they all had stinking breath. Most of them had rotting gums and many with loose teeth. And this started to alarm me, especially seeing as I'd been dispensing what I thought was state-of-the-art veterinary medicine. I've been recommending vaccinations, worm tablets, and by default going along with the conventional commercial foodstuffs and thinking that was okay. Indeed, horror of horrors, shock of... I'm shamefaced to say that I used to say to my clients, look, the manufacturers have got it right. They've worked out all the formulae and they've devoted so much research to this, you can rely on them. Yes, I said that. I'm confessing here now. And I'm so very sorry. I had to confess to my clients at that time once I woke up to what was going on. And I asked their forgiveness and then set about trying to make things right. I felt it was necessary to tell my veterinary colleagues, and I made a point of researching the matter because it was so grave, it was so important, and started to write articles. I was not the only one writing articles. There were others, Dr. Breck Muir, Ian Billinghurst, Alan Bennett, Dr. Tom Hungerford, to name a few. We got a lot of pushback from the other vets. They didn't like to hear what we were saying. And indeed, it was mostly personal attacks that we encountered. Very few of them really engaged with the facts that we were seeking to present. So now I jumped ahead a bit and said I'd written a number of articles. I certainly did, from 1991 through till about 1995, 96. It was a prolific time. We were writing lots of articles during that time. But the first one that I wrote was written in August 1991 and published in December 1991. And in that, I basically sketched out the framework of what I saw to be going horribly wrong with the animals. And actually, that framework has stood the test of time. I basically talked about the internal system in the animals and how the teeth rot, the gut is having to digest stuff that shouldn't be there, and this gives rise to all sorts of immune and other compromises. And so that's internally within the animal. But externally, of course, the big problems are to do with veterinary education, with junk pet food, advertising, failings of the regulatory system. And then ultimately, well, not the failings of, but the disuse, the failure to use the legal system. And so I recommended in my first article that there should be mass class actions against the pet food companies and indeed the veterinary schools that aid and abet them. And I wrote that down in my very first article. The editor removed that bit. He published the rest, but he removed the bit about calling for class actions. But the same editor, in about 12 months' time, commissioned me to write the definitive article on how to feed and care for domestic carnivores. It's entitled Preventative Dentistry. And in that, I quote my lawyer's advice that the vets are engaged almost certainly in illegal conduct. And he couches it in terms such that he says, could well be that veterinarians will be top billing on a writ, that is, top billing on an indictment for corruption. And so, right from 1991, 92, 93, we were talking about corruption. This is, and hence, and you asked, how did I come to be called a whistleblower? Well, for that reason. I basically blew the whistle on a mighty fraud, founded on fallacy, founded on false so-called science. It's bogus, junk science. They know full well that they're working at variance with nature, but that's how they get their living. So they keep doing it.
Well, I will tell you my story, how I know of you. So I came across you not that long ago. I'd say maybe 6 to 9 months ago. And to be honest, I cannot remember how I did. I think it may have been by way of Google search when I was curating the season with this topic in mind, trying to find the most perfect person to speak about this. I had bookmarked the Pet Food Con website and knew I'd come back to it because I could not believe I had found someone that mirrored my sentiments that I had learned by connecting the dots as a consumer and as a pet parent who lost my soul kitty to intestinal lymphoma solely from the type of food she was eating her entire life. I was in such awe of how straightforward, candid, and unapologetic you were and are about exposing this side of the pet food industry. Often hushed upon, silenced, and swept under the rug, you were putting it all out there based on decades of rigorous research, keen observation, and lived experience to back it all up. Holding the entire pet food industry's feet to the fire, including fellow veterinarians. Still to this day, veterinarians continue to protect one another regarding this topic, and you are exposing it all at its rotten core. And I applaud you 1,000 times over, because at the end of the day, the veterinarians should know better by now, yet still choose to recommend junk food that is harming and killing our pets. So yeah, again, when I saw you, I was just like, these are all the things that I have thought, felt, learned, experienced, and nobody else was talking about. And so when I found you, I was just completely in awe. So thank you for bringing it to the forefront.
Well, thank you, Angela. That's kind. Look, I'm only doing what any reasonable messenger would do. I just see myself as a messenger. I stumbled on some fundamental truths, and I feel somewhat obligated to share those truths.
You would think that would be the norm, but unfortunately, it's not the norm because they do know the truth and they're not willing to share it like yourself.
Well, you're right there. And so that shines a light on human psychology, primarily psychology. We're a devious species that are constantly on the lookout.
Moral compass, maybe?
It's beyond moral compass. I don't know what it is. They're hardwired to do the wrong thing. It's extraordinary. Sure, that the great majority of vets, look, they're victims. They're victims that have been victimized by the system. As young children, they were fed lies by the pet food companies through the TV and through the supermarket aisle. They then went to vet school and were fed a bunch of more lies and inadequate science dressed up to be the best evidence-based medicine, which of course is fraudulent. And they come out at the end believing this stuff. They've been brainwashed thoroughly. And then they get their first job, and that involves actually selling junk food to the animals as they leave the clinic each time. Most vets these days have the stuff on display.
Mm-hmm.
So the vets themselves are victims of a corrupted system. And then they continue to victimize their patients and their clients, their customers. They're taking money off them under false pretenses on a grand scale. It's truly shocking. Once you delve into it, the fundamental truth is easy, but the corruption that arises out of it is really complex and multidimensional. To give you a real extreme example that I have difficulty living with, but this actually reveals just how bad people tend to be. Young vets used to work for me once I started my practice in 1981 until I was forced to close it in 97. That's another story. I would employ young vets straight out of vet school. And some of them served with me for 2 or 3 years, maybe 4. Yeah, long time. They were well grounded in the truth, in biologically appropriate medicine. They knew that the raw meaty bones are the key to the carnivore code, that you've got to feed those to keep your animals healthy. That's what they knew, understood, and told our clients. This was the ethos in our practice. Some of those young vets went on to start their own practices, and the majority of them just simply reverted to the conventional way and started to stock junk food in their waiting rooms. So they were well versed in what was necessary to maintain the health of animals, the preventative strategy to prevent ill health. But then once they became their own boss, it was easier and more profitable to sell the junk. So that's people who were extremely well coached and mentored and guided in how to do the job and do it properly. And they just turned their back on it at the first opportunity.
Yeah.
So that's human behavior for you.
I mean, I feel like I have an open mind and a heart, and I'm so eager to learn other things and new ways when it comes to a lot of things, not just pet care, but especially when it comes to pet care, because I lost my little one to intestinal lymphoma from food. So I want to absorb everything that I can. And I would think that fellow veterinarians and vet techs and the whole entire pet care umbrella and pet industry would do the same, because I would hope that love for pets is where it's at. I know it's not for some of these businesses. They see profit and an opportunity and they take it in the pet industry. But I guess I want to think of the positive of people and hope that the love for the animals is really there and they would be open-minded to learn these things. But unfortunately, that's not always the case.
Quite right. Sorry tale, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Well, the trouble is you're coming to this with perhaps the wrong lens. You know, you're coming at it from a humane, moralistic, empathetic, optimistic frame of mind.
Right.
But if you stop, take a step back, come to realize that all of this is artificially generated by the junk pet food industry when they came into being in the 1860s. And that since that time, what's that, 140, 160 odd years, they've built this incredible bubble economy. So Jack Spratt teamed up with a fellow called Charles Cruft, lent his name to Cruft's Dog Show. You have the Westminster Dog Show in New York, but we in the UK have the Cruft's Dog Show. Anyway, Charles Cruft and Jack Spratt got together. Jack Spratt initiated it, and they made these wheat fibrine biscuits. And they encouraged people to keep mutant wolves, dogs, lots of different breeds. And the more mutant they were, the better they liked it. So Dachshunds with tiny legs, and Borzois with long snouts, and Whippets with very long legs, and so on. So they're all hugely mutated from the wolf genotype that starts it all going. And then they encouraged all these people, because, of course, the community at that time was not particularly well educated, as they aren't today. And they accepted that this stuff that they were selling to them was superior. And there were all sorts of advertisements from the time stating that no mill sweepings, only the finest grain, only the finest beef, and so on. So they're making these claims. So that you end up with modified wolves being forced to consume junk food. And that's the start of all this. Then they progressed and they sold a lot of this junk food. So there was a huge economy that they were building. Obviously, the suppliers, the manufacturers, the distributors, and themselves, the merchants were making a lot of money out of this. Vets came along on the tail end of this. Previously, they were treating horses, cattle, sheep, pigs. But after a while, they turned their attention to cats and dogs and found that they were all ill. So there was a lot of opportunity to make money out of all these sick dogs and cats in this bubble economy.
Right.
So the main beneficiaries of this bubble economy are the manufacturers, Mars, Nestle, and Colgate in the present day. But of course, the suppliers of the wheat and the sugar beet pulp and the tallow from the factories and the fish that they bring in by the boatload and on, all of those industries are dependent on this, as are, of course, the retailers, the transport, the advertising industry. It's a massive, massive economy, but it's a bubble economy because it's based on fraud. It's based on corruption. Will this bubble economy ultimately explode? Will it be punctured? Will it just quietly collapse? I don't know. But it shouldn't go on. Now that we know and understand, back in the 1860s, people didn't know. They didn't understand how harmful it was to feed carnivores on this junk. But we do know now. And I think any judge in a court of law would agree with us if we presented the evidence that this was all fraudulent and should stop. Now, well, you say, well, that will destroy a vast global economy. Yes, but it'll create a new economy, a healthful economy, probably a different economy, because a lot of people like the idea of having furry toys, because that's unfortunately how they're presented, and they like the furry toy formula off the supermarket shelf, and they believe in the furry toy fixer, the vet, who's masquerading as a beneficent individual, but in fact, he's really got dark secrets. Once you start to say, it's all wrong, that's a challenge for people. They don't like to hear that what they've been doing all these decades is so horribly wrong. They don't like to hear that you can't trust the advertisements, you can't trust the regulators, and worst of all, you can't trust the medicine man, the vet. And that is upsetting for people, and they resist that. They don't like to hear this bad news. Well, actually, it's not bad news. It's good news. It's opening people's eyes to reality and the opportunity to create a much better world.
Yeah.
A world for pets, world for people, and improve the environment instead of just simply exploiting the environment and not giving it a tinker's cuss. It would be about repairing the damage we've done and creating a new wholesome economy where people who get dogs and cats understand from the outset that they are carnivores with very special needs. They're not little humans. Well, put it this way, they should not be fed a human-style diet. They should not be fed recipes. They don't need formulas. They need whole carcasses of other animals, or next best option, pragmatic option, raw meaty bones. So it's really quite simple. Look, if things do start to unfold and things start to go well, we will make a huge, huge difference to the welfare of animals and the human society. So I think we should get on with it and make a start, which you're doing. You are facilitating this discussion, and hopefully people will listen in and say, yep, we sign up for that.
Yeah, thank you. I hope so. That's why I created this podcast, to bring information like this to light, to change lives and the health of our pets and the planet in the process. So I hope many sign up for that. So let's talk about your book. You have long been a vocal critic of the commercial pet food industry and its fraudulent practices. Your acclaimed book, Multi-Billion-Dollar Pet Food Fraud Hiding in Plain Sight, details the lengths the pet food manufacturers and the vets they partner with will go to perpetuate the myth that canned and kibbled food isn't detrimental to pets' health. It exposes the shocking truth behind the pet food industry's profit-driven practices. From highly processed ingredients to misleading labels, it reveals the dark underbelly of an industry that prioritizes profit over the well-being of our pets. And so I want to read in your own words from your website the description of this book, because you say it best, and I did not want to paraphrase. So this is quote unquote Dr. Tom Lonsdale. From clever marketing ploys and outright lies, the giant corporations that manufacture the bulk of the world's pet food have been serving up their own brand of disingenuous hyperbole for decades. And consumers have swallowed it all, just as the companies intended. Behind the glossy advertising campaigns and hype of the pet care industry lies an inconvenient, unpalatable truth. These commercial, highly processed diets we feed our pets are responsible for causing a global epidemic of sickness and suffering. From tartar-encrusted teeth and stinking breath to weakened immunity and a host of diseases, our pets are being harmed by the highly processed junk pet food we place in their bowls. In their pursuit of profit, manufacturers are putting revenue before animal welfare in an industry valued globally at $147.3 billion US dollars in 2023. It's a fraud of epic proportions, and it needs to stop now. Manufacturers and vets selectively disregard scientific facts, pushing money-making products and services that cost us billions and ultimately our pets their lives. Exposing the shameful failings of pet food manufacturers, veterinary practices, and veterinary schools intent on keeping us in the dark. It's time to blow away the smokescreen for your pets and wallet's sake. Are you ready? End quote. Boom, boom, and boom, drop the mic 500 times. Yeah, well, I'm ready, so let's do it. Shall we start with explaining the shameful failings of the vet schools? In part 3 of your book, Confronting Reality Veterinary Schools, you talk about the collaboration between the junk pet food industry and vet profession, how big pet food companies finance all of the vet school industry, how vets are brainwashed and still recommending this junk food, and how the system keeps our pets sick. I think this is a great place to start, and then we will explain the shameful failings of veterinary practices and the pet food manufacturers separately. So I will give you the floor. Take it away with the shameful failings of vet schools.
Well, that's all they know. They, all of them. I haven't found one that is prepared to do and say the honest thing. And again, look, they're the products of history, how this all evolved. So the vast institutions with a long history of, for the most part, doing the wrong thing, or much of the time doing the wrong thing. When I was at vet school, and at graduation, I think it was, an eminent medical doctor addressed the throng, the graduating class, and said, look, we tell you a lot of stuff whilst you're at medical school or veterinary school, but unfortunately, I have to confess that 50% of it is not right and 50% is good information. But our problem is we don't know which is which. So that's a problem from the get-go. And very importantly, I say that their methodology, their scientific methodology, is fundamentally flawed. So that inevitably gives rise to false information, even when they're acting with the best will in the world, because they're using outmoded techniques. They're using reductionist techniques where they reduce complex systems to a couple of variables and try to fit outcomes into this concept of two things interacting. Well, that's absurd, in fact. So there's the reductionist thing, there's the cause and the effect, there's the germ theory, which for the most part has been not discredited, but certainly hugely modified. So at core, a lot of what they do, while seeming to be neutral and well-intended, is structurally, methodologically inaccurate or unsuitable. Right now, I'm publishing a couple of papers in the Journal of Periodontal Research and in the Sydney University Control and Therapy, blowing a hole in that whole scientific enterprise. And that's based on my earlier paper, The Cybernetic Hypothesis of Periodontal Disease, that I published in 1994. It originated in 1992, but it's only now, 34 years later, that it's getting an airing again, but in the highest possible journal. So this is superb and calls into question the entire framework of veterinary, medical, and dental teaching. At core, they get it wrong. And then a further problem, or many further problems, arise from that, not least their motivations are not the best. And how they manage their defective science is not the best. I mean, we can all use defective tools, and that's fair enough. But if you say that the defective tool is the be-all and end-all of everything, then that's when you're making a mistake. And they make a mistake. They talk about complete and balanced food, scientifically formulated. These are just empty words, empty rhetoric that has no basis in truth or in fact. So at core, what they're up to is not very wholesome. And then they absolutely make a point of not researching what is wholesome. So they promote the bad stuff and prevent the truth getting an airing. So the poor veterinary students get 5 years of this brainwashing. The teachers in the system, they know which side their bread's buttered on. Those that are coming up in the ranks, they keep an eye on their superiors. They see where the ladders are leading upward, what they depend on, the ladder up to the pet food industry's ear. I digress. I've got a cartoon in the latest book, Spin Doctors, where this faceless giant, the pet food industry, is there, but he's got vets in his pocket. He's got vets scaling a ladder to talk into his ear. That's what's going on. It's a serious thing that junk pet food giant controls the whole thing. No veterinary can occur without pet food giants because all the animals are sick all of the time, and that's where the vets get their money from. And just stopping that would just devastate the veterinary industry overnight, if it was stopped overnight. That's highly improbable, and it would actually just tail off. Dentists worked out that drilling, billing, and filling, whilst that was lucrative, was not the appropriate thing to do for their dental patients. They should extol the benefits of prevention. Their industry didn't collapse. There's still plenty of dentists around providing all sorts of services. So vets shouldn't be fearful that their industry is suddenly going to collapse. Not at all. And not only that, this current industry, whilst it's terribly bad for cats and dogs and people and the environment, it's also terribly bad for vets. That's why I think 4 times the number of vets kill themselves as compared with the general public. The attrition rate in veterinary ranks is colossal. People find it incredibly stressful that once they're inducted into the profession and they're carried along on the conveyor belt, but they find that it's such a stressful business, basically ministering to a constant procession of animals that never get better with chronic diseases, the skin, ears, gut, and teeth, of course. And it's a demoralizing, disheartening activity.
Mm.
Whereas the way I see it, and once my eyes were opened, then it was incredibly uplifting.
Right.
I blew the whistle, knew the answer to why the animals are sick, and went about just trying to encourage everybody to improve the health and welfare of the animals. So yes, it's real bad in the veterinary schools. The veterinary students are victims, and they then get churned out in their hundreds, perhaps thousands, to further victimize the community.
And can you talk about how the big pet food companies finance vet schools, their education?
Okay, well, they do. Yeah, they certainly do. They fund chairs in veterinary schools, professorships, and they fund research activities. The research is really nothing more than marketing efforts and product improvement for the most part. They don't fund anything to do with actually finding out why the animals are ill. No, they don't do that. You asked the question about their funding, but actually, whilst they do, and that's very bad because they fund for the wrong reasons, I say that's nothing much more than the grease and oil that keeps the machine going. And this is the sad thing. You see, the bulk of the veterinary school expenditure is devoted to building the buildings and maintaining the buildings and paying the staff and doing a whole host of things. These so-called sponsors, benefactors, come along at the end and they tip in a few thousand, even a few $1,000,000. But it's small beer. But that's enough to steer the entire ship. So the whole of the veterinary school, the bricks and mortar, and all those physical things are paid for in different ways in the UK and in Australia by the government. Not sure what the situation is in the States. But it's this sponsorship money that seems to just turn the heads of the administrators and, of course, all the researchers. And if they're not researching the stuff for the pet food companies themselves, they're not going to blow the whistle on their colleagues who are. Because after all, their time may come if they keep their nose clean and stay out of any controversy. So self-censorship is incredibly powerful. Earlier, I was talking about the awful situation where young vets who know the truth actually deliberately do the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a middle ground where just people just keep their heads down and say nothing. And we know about this. I mean, we know about during the Holocaust in Germany. We know in current very bad conflict zones that people who know a lot about the disasters that are being inflicted say little or nothing. It's safer that way. Keep your head down and hopefully no one will notice. So that's what's going on in these veterinary schools. There's been no published record of a comparison of junk food with raw meaty bones. Of course, there's been none comparing the can and the packet with a diet of whole carcasses. So no, so the foundation of what they're doing is completely wrong. Whereas in any other industry, if you say that, look, I've got a car with an internal combustion engine and it's better than a horse, then the argument is that you've got to prove it. So you get your car and you drive the car along and it goes twice as fast as the horse and it carries more, whatever. So the onus is on the one that comes along latest to demonstrate the improvement. With the junk pet food, it's the other way around. We've got an accepted fundamental that dogs and cats are fed out of the can or the packet bearing the word food. but that's a lie. So that's the starting point. This idea that they fund nutrition is an abomination. It's not funding nutrition, it's funding formula making, manufacturing.
Right.
This is chemical engineering. It's not feeding.
Right.
Feeding is what they do in the zoo. They drag in the carcass and hand it to the lions and tigers. Feeding is what the farmer does for his herds and flocks. But it's not feeding that's done with cats and dogs. No, it's forcing them to consume the product of chemical engineering. That's what the veterinary schools are engaged in, chemical engineering that they call nutrition.
Right. And food. And it's not food.
And it's not food. So it's a misnomer at that very fundamental level. And that's the problem. So we have difficulties talking about some of these things. Obviously, we use common language, but it's difficult when the words get in the way, when they don't help us.
Well, you shared this bit of info in the book regarding vets and their nutritional knowledge. Here's a quote, and I felt it was very important to include. So the quote goes, "They have no theory about how to feed pets a natural diet. Consequently, they have no practical know-how, and thus they have zero experience of how to feed pets for health and well-being. For most vets, the idea of feeding pets appropriately on whole animal carcasses or raw meaty bones is a foreign land replete with scary monsters, pitfalls, and dangers galore. Better, they think, to stay safe and follow their vet school teaching." End quote.
Yes, that's right. Stay safe, self-censorship, they engage in, keep their heads down, and hopefully nobody will notice.
Right.
Yeah.
So I have a couple more quotes here too that I want to share that it's important. So you have one in the book. It's regarding veterinary schools. You said, quote unquote, "Cloaked in an aura of integrity and invincibility, the veterinary school is founded on fallacy, living a lie. Anyone drawn into its orbit becomes contaminated and damaged. We pity the poor pets at the bottom of the pile and the next the pet owners, who are all grist to the junk pet food mill. They enthuse about latest research and evidence-based medicine while ignoring the fact that only research approved by the junk food sponsors is performed. Consequently, they ignore that the evidence-based medicine mantra is but a smokescreen whereby the only evidence available serves to protect and promote the products and influence of the pet food companies. The university controls the staff, and the junk pet food companies control the university." That's another boom right there.
Indeed. Yeah, that sounds like a pretty damning indictment of the whole box and dice, and it's true. I wrote it. I submitted this to 2 editors. It went past the lawyer. It's true. It's true what I say. So hopefully your listeners will go and check out some of this for themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's grievous. It's very bad because, that was published in 2023. We first blew the whistle in 1991.
Right.
So what's that?
Right.
32 years later. Oh dear. For 32 years, when we could have been doing the right thing, or the veterinary schools could have been doing the right thing, they were studiously doing the wrong thing. And also, they were hounding me. I suffered 4, even 5 separate disciplinary actions where they tried to destroy me. And finally, in 1997, I had to give up practice because they were trying to get me removed from the veterinary register for daring to tell the truth, for daring to say what the reality was. Yeah. So, and this was carried out by vets. 2 of them worked for the Mars Corporation, 1 worked for Nestle. And they lodged complaints with the veterinary board. And this is an important thing. The junk pet food industry don't do their own dirty work. The dirty work is done by the vets. It's the vets who stand up and say that, the complete and balanced formula, and it's scientifically formulated, and that raw meat is replete with parasites and bacteria, and you're going to injure the health of your animals and yourself and contaminate the kitchen and the lounge room and the waterways, and you've got to stop doing this.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go into, I would say 99% of vet clinics and you mention that you're feeding raw, you get that type of response every time. It's always some pushback. But here's a great analogy in the book that you included, and I thought it was great, and I wanted to include it here. So you said university vet schools that sacrifice their students in the service of junk pet food companies can be likened to parasite-controlled rats. So the parasites, which are the pet food makers, by the application of very little financial oil and grease, which are the profits extracted from unwitting pet owners, infiltrate and control university decision-making systems. Consequently, the companies turn universities into brainwashing vet school on the planet. The output of those vet brainwashing machines, not just in Sydney, but on the available evidence, and every machines are the legions of vets whose brains have been rewired in the service of Mars, Nestle, and Colgate-Palmolive.
Quite so. Yes. Epigenetic changes in their brains so that they can only spout the conventional dogma, conventional to them, that is.
Right.
It's scary that we should do this with the so-called healers and carers, that they are so off beam, so doing the wrong thing. And it's a lesson to us in other areas too. So I think there's a giant failed experiment going on where all these animals being fed inappropriately and their medical carers are doing the wrong thing. When people finally wake up to this fact, there should be a complete readdressing of the situation, and there should be big commissions of inquiry to find out how this could have arisen and how it got so out of hand before anyone took notice.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you have congressional inquiries in the US. In the UK, they have Lords inquiries in the House of Lords. Here we have judicial inquiries into major failings of this nature, where everything is wrong all of the time. It's extraordinary. But again, it's a bubble economy, and there are a lot of people making a lot of money out of it, and they don't want the bubble to burst.
Right. Okay, so we explained the shameful failings of the vet schools. Now let's talk about the shameful failings of the veterinary practices themselves. I have quotes again that I will include, but I will give you the floor.
Okay, well, that's worrisome again, because vets comport themselves in a way that suggests that they're honest and filled with integrity, and that they're friendly, kind, compassionate individuals. Well, I think most of that is a charade, because I can say from my own personal experience here in Western Sydney that a lot of local vets, local to where I was practicing, knew full well the reality, because I've been publicising it for long enough. And I would see their clients, whether by chance or whether by design, they would come from those other veterinary clinics to me, and they would tell me exactly what those other vets were saying and doing all the time. And none of those other vets ever did and said the truthful, honest thing when it came down to feeding cats and dogs. And feeding cats and dogs is the foundation of good health. I mean, you need fresh air, fresh water, and fresh, appropriate food. The air and the water are given. It's the food, including the texture of the food, that is critically important, without which they are inevitably sick all of the time. So back in these practices, they deal with this procession of sick animals on a daily basis, and they constantly ignore the foundations of why the animals are sick. The animals are sick because of initially, they're poisoned. The animals are poisoned. You can use the word poison advisedly.
Right. Yep, I do.
Yeah, you can, because it means something that brings about ill health or premature death. That's what this stuff in the can and the packet does. It poisons in several different ways.
Yes, it does.
First way is the buildup of poisons in the gums. Okay, so that's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, poisons from the gums. Poisons from the small intestine, where the inappropriate chemicals, the carbohydrates, the supplements, all the junk gets absorbed through the small intestine. The large intestine is then a repository for the residue, and there's a vast population of bacteria in there producing ever more toxins which are absorbed into the body. 3 sources of toxins, poisons. Then all of that gives rise to disease of organs. Diseased organs produce all sorts of biochemicals, which are toxic too. So we've now got 4 sources of poisoning traveling around the body. Then these vets in these other practices reach to the shelves above them or in their pharmacy and get the antibiotics and the corticosteroids and other such incredibly toxic drugs and stick those into the animal. So now we've got 5 sources of poisoning. I just add that there's a 6th source, which is when every now and again you get a pet food recall and they say, there's too much vitamin D or there's melamine in it and so on. But that's very rare and unusual. It's these 5 sources of poison which these vets are engaged in, and they don't stop.
Plus the prescription foods that are just the same as the regular junk food.
Yeah, of course. That's right. Yeah. It's just they're twice as bad because they're twice as pricey. You pay more money to do the same amount of harm. But the poor vets, you see, they come out of the vet school clutching the manual produced either by Hills.
Clutching their pearls of kibble?
Yes.
I just had a visual.
Yeah, but you're right. So Hills have a book that the students get given at the time of graduation or before then, and similarly with Mars Corporation, I believe. So, and it's indexed, and they thumb through, A through to Z, and each different condition. You read up on what condition the animals have got and what's the junk food appropriate. But of course, you've got this absurd situation where you've got specialist heart diets, specialist dental diets, specialist liver diets, and so on. But wait a minute, what about all the other organs whilst you're dealing with that? Don't they get a look in? No, they don't. So it's an admission on their part that their substances are unsuitable. Whereas the zookeeper just feeds carcasses regardless. He doesn't have a diet for bad hearts in lions or bad hearts in tigers, and that they must therefore get different carcasses on a given day of the week. It's absurdity.
Right. Yeah. Nutrition should be simple. It shouldn't be complex where there's nutrition for this ailment and that ailment and this breed and this long hair and this short hair.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. They've got breeds.
Nutrition is simple. Take it back to nature. It's simple.
It is. But the people get hooked on this. They start to dine out on it, all the complexity of the veterinary advice that they've been given and all the different medications that their pets are on.
Right.
And because they've been themselves so terribly brainwashed, they go along with it.
Yep.
One of my ex-nurses works in a boarding kennel, and that boarding kennel gathers dogs from all parts of Sydney, and they all come with their medicine chest full of drugs that they're on for psychotropic this and behavioral that and gut ailments and ear ailments and all manner of things. So, and of course, these dogs are coming from wealthy households. And just to keep the dogs upright, they're having to be given pills galore several times a day and different other medicaments and so on. And that's the basis of veterinary medicine today, massively over-medicating the animals, when in fact, simple prevention sorts the matter.
Yes.
Until the end stage, of course, towards the end stage, but that should be a very steep decline. Unfortunately, they prop up the animals with all these medicaments and ensure a very slow, painful, and costly decline. You see, we're going to cover this as best we can on a podcast, but it really needs a full commission of inquiry over several weeks, probably, of calling in teams of witnesses to say what's been going on and how it's an absolute shocker. It's like the book says, multi-billion-dollar fraud,
Right.
and cruel, massively cruel.
I mean, that's what I've said it many of times in these episodes, that it should be illegal to call this food. It should be illegal to sell it as food. It's a crime. And I mirror your sentiments, and it's gross.
Well, I agree with you. You tell people how to feed their animals from the get-go when they're puppies and kittens. They barely need the vet at all thereafter. Yeah.
You mentioned the overuse of medication. I do want to mention that we have an episode with Dr. Judy Morgan coming up later in the season that is addressing this exact thing, the overuse of meds and chemicals on our pets. So stay tuned for that. Also, I have a quote from your book that I want to share. It's an opening quote that resonated with me, and I'll tell you why. So you said, "Not one person venturing up the path, entering the reception room and then the consulting room in my newly opened vet practice had ever been given sound, healthy dietary advice for their pet. All new clients grew up in a world programmed to accept commercial pet food as normal. All had been following the advice of qualified vets, and all were unwittingly harming their pets. Multi-level failings on a tragic scale." And so this was my life. Learned from my parents, who learned from their parents, who learned the same advice from their vets. Generational deceit, raising pets on poison and junk. Mirroring what I had known my whole life into adulthood. When I found my little one in a parking lot, I immediately cared for her by way of learned behavior and knowledge, never questioning or knowing another way. This cost me the life of my soul kitty, Monkey Bean. I lost her in 2017 to intestinal lymphoma. Once I connected the dots, it traced back to the food she was eating, solely a dry kibble diet her whole life, made and manufactured by one of the big pet food brands. So, yeah, that quote hit a little hard in, I guess, the best of confirming ways.
Wow. Yeah, I'm sure. And you'd be distraught to realize this. But you're going to great lengths to try and make amends and atone for these failings.
Right.
So, congratulations.
Thank you. I mean, this podcast is one of those ways that I'm trying to right my wrongs and share what I've learned so that others aren't faced with what I was faced with, and to lose their pets prematurely and at younger and younger ages that it's occurring. I mean, she was 13 when I lost her. I always thought she was going to live to like 18, and I thought that she was very young and it was a premature death. So yeah, if I can just help one pet parent see the light a little bit with nutrition, because it all starts and ends with nutrition. And that's my biggest thing, is nutrition, because I lost her from failed junk food nutrition. Can't even call that nutrition, but yeah. And most of her lesions were in the small intestine and other parts of the digestive tract. And so I literally took her x-rays. I took her medical report of the lymphoma findings. I looked up all the words on it, what it meant, where they were in the body. If I didn't know the placement of the body, I looked it up. And that's how I ended up connecting the dots. I was just like, well, what goes through the intestines all the time to cause this type of cancer? And what's the poison going through there? And I was just like, food goes through there every day, all day. She was grazing all day on kibble. Like, she, started vomiting when she was almost 3 years old is when it started. So from 3 years old to 13, she never stopped vomiting. Like the consistencies changed, the quantity changed, but she started vomiting undigested kibble in piles over and over and over and over again. And when I called the vet to be like, hey, is this normal? I don't even remember exactly what she said. At some point, she said, oh, maybe she's allergic to the protein. So I switched the protein up. I continued to give the same junk kibble, just different protein. I even went grain-free at some point because I was doing research and they were like, oh, maybe it's the grains. So I took out the grains. But, still the same. She never stopped vomiting. And then eventually she presented with over grooming, bald spots, hot spots, like most of the fur from her tail was missing. And towards the end of her life, the vomiting became like mostly liquid, but they would be like green bile, green and yellow stuff, and it just like a really, really foul smell. So yeah, that was quite the journey that she and I were on. And that was all due to her food. And if a vet would have told me, hey, how about natural feeding? That would have been a game changer for me back then. And I am certain she would have lived way past 13.
From a distance, after the event, it sounds like you're right, but we've got to be aware that cancer can come from many other sources. But you're right. And the point that you make that she was grazing is telling, because that toxic stuff is sitting in your pussycat's bowel 24 hours a day, 7 days, relentlessly. It's always there.
Right.
I had a little apricot poodle that we thought it had eaten chocolate. We made it vomit just to make sure there was no chocolate in its stomach, but instead it vomited kibble.
Oh, I saw that video.
Yes.
Go ahead. It's great. It's a great story.
So the kibble sitting in the little dog's stomach for 12 whole hours, so hard that the stomach juices could not soften it sufficiently in 12 hours, and it's still sitting there. So that's what happens. This stuff sits in the stomach, hanging around until there's enough body fluids that poured into the stomach to soften the stuff before it can travel down the bowel. So even if animals only eat once a day, nonetheless, their bowels are full of this stuff 24 hours a day.
Right.
And the poisons are circulating in their bloodstream 24 hours a day, reaching all different parts of the body, all different organs. And you know yourself that if you, for instance, have too much alcohol to drink, well, that's a poison, and your head feels swimming, you end up with a headache, you feel bad. Well, it's the same with all these bad chemicals traveling around the animal's entire circulatory system 24 hours a day, 7 days, that they can never escape. They're constantly feeling ill, unwell. And small wonder that they get crotchety and, in many instances, attack and bite their owners and generally fractious and unhappy. And that can transform. You stop them instantly from feeding the junk and transfer them over to the natural food, and you can get almost instant recovery.
Right.
So we see these things. Yeah, vets don't consider the physicality of this stuff and that this inappropriate batch of chemicals is filling the digestive tract all that time. So you tumble to what's most likely happened to your cat. As part of what happened to your cat, the hair loss on the tail, the hot spots, the over grooming, that's other elements to this whole terrible tale. And of course, if you didn't give her raw meaty bones, then she would have had a shocking bad breath and rotten teeth and gums as well.
Oh, absolutely, she did.
Yeah. Oh, so bad.
She lost many teeth, either from tooth reabsorption, loose teeth, or extractions. And the plaque and tartar was so bad, it was like started to disintegrate her teeth and gums and roots. Like it was bad.
Well, absolute torment, because an animal in the wild wouldn't endure that. It would die very quickly because it would be ineffectual. It couldn't hunt its prey. It would have a stinking breath, and its competitors would know that it was a very sick animal. But we keep these animals in I call it the antechamber of death for all of their lives, 13 years of being, ready to die. But sorry, and that probably hurts to hear that, but that's the reality, and it needn't be. But the vets don't realize. I mean, you talk about teeth being removed and tartar and so on. And what was your vet doing all these 13 years? How much did it cost you?
Well, back then, which going into another episode that you and I are going to be doing towards the end of the season, which is about raising vet costs and the truth behind why that's happening. But back then, when she had her anesthesia dental cleaning with the extractions, it was $250. Now, just for a cleaning, no extractions, no nothing, just for an anesthesia dental cleaning, it's over $1,000.
Oh,
Insanity.
And it shouldn't happen. There should be no expenditure. And for $5 a week, you can feed your cat and have no dental issues at all and no health issues. Just buy a $5 bag of chicken wings and maybe a small fish here and there.
We were talking about the hot spots and all of that. And at the time when I was taking her to the vet regarding like the bald spots, the missing fur, and she never mentioned the food, but she did recommend flea meds for the scratching. Never mind the fact that she was an indoor cat with no fleas. So, that's a part of the overservicing that you were talking about in a quote that said, we deplored the overservicing by vets when a simple diet change would, in many cases, alleviate the need for pet owners to consult the vet. So that's exactly what you're saying.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And you also said the human medical and dental professions extol the benefits of a healthy natural diet, but the veterinary profession is influenced at every level by the junk pet food industry. And I will add to that the veterinary profession is the only industry steadily recommending the complete opposite of a healthy natural diet.
Yes, so, absolutely. And they still justify it.
Right.
You try and challenge them on that, and they will not hear a word against it. It's extraordinary. Trouble is, of course, they are the rank and file, the practitioners in the community. It's the people at the top who need to be held accountable. The regulators, the deans and provosts of the vet schools, and of course the regulatory bodies that run the show, because in each of your states over there's a state veterinary board that registers and regulates vets, but they blithely disregard the fraud and they refuse to read my books. Oh, that's the other thing. I publish the books. For the most part, nobody reads them because the vets won't read them for fear that they'll then get to learn too much and have a morally unsustainable position. They don't want to know. They don't want to know the truth. And then the raw feeding brigade don't want to hear these fundamental truths either. They just want to continue with their formulae and recipes. It's seriously bad. What can you do? That book that we're now talking about, multi-billion-dollar pet food fraud, it won the best book of the year, 2023, by the Dog Writers Association of America. So the dog writers, who should know something about writing articles and radio shows and the like for dogs, said it's the best book of the year. But people don't read it.
Well, hopefully they will after this episode and after today, because, I just stumbled upon you not that long ago. So maybe they've not heard of you. Maybe they will now, and it will open eyes and hearts. And this is, like we said before, this is why I'm doing all of this so that pet parents don't have to go through what I went through.
That's right.
Especially, we were mentioning Monkey losing her teeth and all of that. Like, talk about feeling guilty as a pet parent, knowing that this occurred under my watch and to come to find out that it was preventable. So I'm sharing this information so that others can learn from my mistakes and prevent it. as we've mentioned many of times, Raw Meaty Bones does a good job at that. But stay tuned for another episode with Dr. Tom when he talks about all raw meaty bones, because we'll all be learning in real time on that episode, because I knew of raw meaty bones as like a healthy addition to a diet, but not as the primary diet. So that will be all new education for me. We'll be learning it at the same time together. And I will have loads and loads of questions because, like you mentioned to me, it's about taking what you learned and kind of sitting on a shelf and then learning something new.
I look forward to it.
Okay, we explained the shameful failings of the vet schools and vet practices. Now let's talk about the shameful failings of the pet food manufacturers.
Well, I'm just disgusted. Take Colgate, for instance. They made most of their fortune, as I understand it, selling toothbrushes and toothpaste. So they absolutely know the essential nature of dental health. That's their big selling point in the dental profession. But when it comes to cats and dogs, that's all ignored as they make further billions of dollars brainwashing the vets and brainwashing the community to say this is the brand that most vets recommend and this is absolutely the best you can do for your cat and dog with their science diet. So it's a misnomer. It's a complete fraud. That's Colgate for you. Nestle, well, they know the harmful effects of their junk foods, their confectionery, the harmful effects of all those sugary sweets and candy bars and so on. And then they sell their Friskies and their Purina. And that's under their label, Nestle Purina. Mars, some of the worst. That's a private company. If they piled their dollar notes one on top of the other, I suspect they would reach to the moon and back as a private company. So nobody really knows what happens within that company. You can, if you've got diligence and time and money and effort, find out what Nestle and Colgate are up to within their corporate structure because they're quoted companies. They're offer stocks on the stock exchange, but Mars don't. It's a private company. It's all shrouded in secrecy. And yet they push for more and more and more. And of course, they absolutely know how bad their products are, but the longer they can get away with it, the more money they make. I mean, in some ways, I suspect they know that the end will eventually come. But in the meantime, they will make as much money as they can, exploiting the people, but at the same time proclaiming that what they're doing and saying and selling is advantageous to the consumers. It's nothing of the sort. So the whole thing is based on fallacies, is lies built upon lies built upon lies. And it's very hard to find your way through all of that. People need help to overcome their indoctrination. It's not easy for people. It was not easy for me. It was not easy for me to actually realize that I've been duped.
Yeah, it's not easy for anyone to realize and admit they've been duped because I think everyone sees it as a reflection of us, of ourselves, something we did. But the reality is it's a reflection of massive manipulation by the other party. And so once we wake up to it, our lives can change for the better. So please don't think about it as a reflection of you should have known better. We just didn't know, if that makes sense. I also want to add there's a lot of vertical control going on. So you take an example like a company, one of the big companies that makes what our pets eat, so the commercial and the prescription diet. They also own where they go for care, like the vet clinics and the hospitals, how they are diagnosed. So they now own the diagnostic companies, what gets recommended. So their protocols, diets, and referrals. And they're even beginning to acquire pet insurance companies and other pet services like pet sitting and dog walking services. It is the pet food industry's self-established, vicious, self-watering system that is keeping them alive and thriving while keeping our pets sick. And we'll get into it in the episode further down when we're talking about rising vet costs. but we'll talk about how we pet parents are feeding this beast and that vertical control. So that's just my little tidbit of info that I wanted to add to your beautiful tidbit of info.
Very good.
Yeah, and I'll just add another quote before we wrap it up, because this one is important. And you describe a little of what I just mentioned on the vertical control. You said brand name junk products are spoken of approvingly. At reception, when paying the bill, there's an opportunity to buy those same shiny packaged products. Indeed, there's an opportunity to return time and time again to collect weekly supplies of the junk products recommended and sold by University Veterinary Teaching Hospital, Sydney, end quote. But also, name your U.S. company or wherever you live, the takeover is the same across the globe. This quote reflects the prescription food empire that's been built by these manufacturers and is just one way pet parents feed the beast that we will go further into in another episode. Okay, so I want to begin to wrap this conversation up by again inviting everyone to listen and receive this information with open eyes, ears, hearts, and minds. We are sharing the linear truth in this dark world called the pet food industry. The truth can be hard to hear or harsh to some, but it does not change that it's the truth. There's much evidence to back all of what Dr. Tom is saying up. And so I will leave the listeners and you all with two quotes. The first one is from Dr. Douglas Bryden, director of the Center for Veterinary Education at the University of Sydney, who had this to say about the Raw Meaty Bones Promotes Health book that Dr. Tom wrote. He says, every graduate and undergraduate veterinarian should read the book, for it has the potential to challenge the things they believe to be true and gives them the wonderful opportunity to step back from themselves and to look more passionately and more deeply at the science they practice and to realize how important it is to listen carefully to others who may have a pearl of wisdom to share. I say that is so kindly, open-hearted, and open-mindedly spoken.
Thank you, Angela. It was.
Okay, the second quote is from Professor Stuart Reed, Dean of the Royal Veterinary College and then President of the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons, had this to say. He said, quote unquote, if only half of what you say is true, then this is a very big issue. And I say to that, indeed, it is an unfathomable size issue.
Yes, I agree with you very wholeheartedly.
Here's a little teaser. I mentioned it a little bit throughout the episode, but Dr. Tom will be back later in the season to explain rising vet costs, whistleblowing the facts behind mega corporations and private equity firms buying up vet clinics, raising vet costs, and how this affects us, our pets, and vets alike. We will go more in depth about the vertical control that I mentioned these megacorps and private equity firms have in the pet industry and their self-established vicious self-watering system that is keeping them alive and thriving while keeping our pets sick. And we'll go in depth into how we as pet parents are feeding that beast. So let's talk a little bit more about you for a second. You have so many great resources. So I want to tell everyone what they are. You have 4 books, which includes the one we talked about today, The Multi-Billion-Dollar Pet Food Fraud Hiding in Plain Sight. You also have Raw Meaty Bones Promotes Health and Work Wonders, Feed Your Dog Raw Meaty Bones. And your latest book, just released April of 2026, is Spin Doctors, Junk Pet Food Partners in Crime. Aside from the books, you have an amazing website called thepetfoodcon.com, which serves as an educational hub on which these shameful, little-known practices within the pet food industry are revealed. And it also provides the tools and scientific guidance you need to keep your pets healthy and happy with a natural and unprocessed raw meaty bones diet. In addition, I'm not done. He has so much more. You have another website called rawmeatybones.com, that is a plethora of information on feeding our pets raw meaty bones as their primary diet. Everything you wanted to know and more is there, even how to transition your pet onto a raw meaty bones diet. And you cover raw meaty bones diet for both dogs and cats. Your YouTube channel and Facebook are also bustling with raw meaty bones info and so much more. And so I say all of this to say that there are so many ways to learn from Dr. Tom. Please check it out. You will not regret it, and you will have a healthier, happier pet for it.
They will. Yes. Yeah, that's our mission. And I shall be delighted to play host to all the people who want to go and have a look-see. Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. So where can everyone find you, your social handles? I mentioned the 2 websites.
Probably the best place is to go to thepetfoodcon.com and spend some time there. Have a look at the different papers, articles, how to feed your dog, how to feed your cat. Look at the case studies. There's some videos there, some TV shows from way back, from back in the 90s. If people have questions for me, well, there's a contact form there, and they can just fill in a few words and I'll answer. Thus far, I've been able to manage the inquiries that have come through. If I start to get thousands of inquiries, well, I might reach my limit. But at this stage, I'm answering inquiries. No problem.
Okay. And please, everyone, use him as a resource. It's a beautiful resource to have. So if you could sum up your final thoughts on the multi-billion-dollar pet food fraud, the pet industry's dirty little secret, what would it be?
Wow. Okay. In a nutshell, the pet food fraud is huge and growing, bigger and nastier by the day. It's time we took note and took action. And to do that, we need to pull together. And that's what I'd like to see happen from here. Not just as pet owners and vets, but as citizens of this planet. We've got an opportunity to make the world a better place. So let's do it. Let's make a start.
I agree. And what would be your advice to pet parents or vets who are knowingly or unknowingly getting duped by the pet food industry scheme?
My advice to them is to read Raw Meaty Bones Promote Health. Just go back to the first book. Go and have a look at the websites first. That's cheap and easy and free to everyone anytime. So do that. And then if they want more in-depth information, go to Raw Meaty Bones Promote Health, the book, and read about it there. That actually is talking about a new theory of health and disease to do with our co-evolution on this planet. Ultimately, that's what's at stake here. The 2 papers that I was mentioning that I'm publishing at the moment, they arise out of advice I've received. There's 2 wars that are going on. One war is against the corruption and the defective science and the failings of the regulatory system. That's war 1. And that's a massive war that needs to be fought and continued with. But there's a war number 2, and that's to create a new theory of health and disease and co-evolution. And I happened to stumble across the answer to that, or leastways I believe I did, and it's the cybernetic hypothesis of periodontal disease in mammalian carnivores, with ramifications and implications for all species, not least humans. So that is a massive thing. And if we get that one up and running, that will completely change the landscape. So that ultimately is my current level of activity directed towards that cybernetic hypothesis. Now that's coming to you, field left. You were not expecting that, but it's very big, and it impacts veterinary medicine, human dentistry, and biology more generally. So it's a big one. But extraordinary as it may seem, I hatched that plan, or at least it came to me as I slept one night. I can almost say in a dream.
Oh, wow.
In 1992. And I wrote it down, and by a miracle, it got published in the Journal of Veterinary Dentistry in 1994, but was not receiving much traction until just this month. And suddenly, I've got 2 important papers about to be published.
Beautiful.
So that's a very big one.
Yes.
And hopefully that is going to transform the landscape and completely change the debate when we talk about good science that yields good predictions and good explanations, because that's what science is supposed to do. It's supposed to offer good predictions and good explanations. And the current system is failing. So we need to replace it.
And this is a little off of left field as well, but I want everybody to know about this. So it's in the book, so please read the book. But you mention your story about Duchess in the book and your heartbreaking revelation while under your care and your keen and humbling observation-based conclusion within caring for her and her story. It's a beautiful revelation, and it took courage and bravery and a big heart, I think, to admit to what you admitted to within that story and to Duchess's pet parents. And so I wish that there was more veterinarians like that. So I applaud you for that realization and the massive apology that you gave to her pet parents. We didn't get to talk about it in depth, but I wanted to mention it because it's a beautiful revelation that you talk about in the book. So everyone, please go and read the book.
Thank you. Some things really do strike you hard, and you just react as best you can at the time. But on reflection, there were so many lessons to be learned from that. It was just such a shame that both the patient and the parents had to suffer so.
Right.
But hopefully, ultimately, it won't have been suffering in vain.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. I mean, your case, your example is in a similar vein, frankly. You were made to suffer by vets who had no idea.
Right.
And they still have no idea. That's the difference. That is the difference. That they haven't had that moment of introspection, that inner doubt. I've got an advantage. My name is Thomas, and doubting Thomas is a concept that's well known. So doubting by name and doubting by nature. So I called into question eventually. I was a bit late. It took me 20 years to wake up to what I've been doing wrong, but finally did. And it's not to do with me. It's just to do with the way things turned out. Where do your thoughts come from? They're unconscious for the most part. We can't engender them. But having come to realize what was happening, I felt, well, both in practice, in the clinic, and in written utterances, it was a case of letting the community know. Later on, we can talk about Dr. May, who's bought the practice and is running the show and is the voice of the future, I hope. I believe she will. She's in her 30s and will take up the baton from here.
Yeah, I mean, within Duchess's story, you said the errors of omission are some of the hardest errors to first identify and then secondly to remedy. We don't know that which we don't know. And that is so true, I think, for all pet parents and, newly aspiring vets as well. You also mentioned for many years, I had followed the conventional veterinary path, thinking I was providing the best of veterinary care. A subtle arrogance and hubris supported my ego, and little Duchess was the innocent victim of my wretched incompetence. I mean, that's pretty powerful.
Well, yes, I'm hearing that again for the first time in a long while. I mean, I wrote that in 2021, edited it in 2022, published it in 2023. Hearing it again now, it has the same gravity, the same truth, and quite some impact. Yeah, it's a pretty bad indictment, but at least it's out there and people can read it.
Yeah.
That's good.
I mean, I'm just at a loss for words that your awareness to all of this and your open-heartedness and mind to see all of this within your practice and connect those dots and want to do it differently and want to share it with the world. Admitting that, coming to that realization, admitting that not just to yourself, but also to the pet parents is a really difficult thing. And I think that's why a lot of veterinarians maybe just put their head down and keep moving and not say anything because they're just not comfortable in admitting to what you admitted to. So it's a really powerful story and excerpt in the book. And I really hope folks will be inspired to go read it.
Well, it can be a release of a burden for people. If they're troubled, if they've got a troubled conscience about stuff, well, just try and clear their conscience and make a new start.
Right. I mean, we all do as veterinarians, as pet parents. We don't know what we don't know. And when we know better, we do better. So that's why we're all here to share.
Yeah. Good. It's all very philosophical, but there's a lot of truth in it. So good. Well done.
Dr. Tom, thank you for bringing this to light, for continuously voicing this worldwide epidemic amongst us, affecting everyone in its path, from pets to pet parents to aspiring and established vets. This fraud affects us all. Thank you for whistleblowing the facts, and I hope this conversation opens eyes and connects dots for many, saving lives in the process. Thank you for fighting, talking, and never silencing. You're changing lives, even if it may seem like no one is listening. I assure you they are. I promise they are. I am listening. Thank you for being here with us today. Thank you for being the voice to our beloved pets fighting for their health. And thank you for being you.
Hey, aren't you kind? Thank you. Well, thank you to everyone. Thank you, Angela. And thank you to all those listening. And let's hope for a better world, which I believe we're in a position to bring about. Thank you. Thank you to all.
Thank you for listening to the Holistic Feline and Friends podcast. It is created, hosted, produced, and released with love. And my hope is you learn something along the way. When we know better, we do better. Please share your knowledge and our podcast with others. For more educational content, follow us on your favorite podcast platform, as well as Instagram at The Holistic Feline and online at theholisticfeline.com, where you will also find our blog that includes corresponding posts for each podcast episode with links to all the good stuff. Thank you again. We'll see you in the next episode.
The Holistic Feline and Friends podcast, website, blog, and socials are for informational and educational purposes only. All information, suggestions, recommendations, or comments, whether by written, verbal, audio, or otherwise, either direct, indirect, or association, is not a substitute for professional veterinary care. Please provide your pets with a minimum annual professional veterinary visit, and more often when health concerns arise. The Holistic Feline, Angela Warwick, and all guests and associates are speaking from experience and education. Please continue your research and form your own opinion. This is in no way a means to diagnose.